Welcome again to CyberSec Plus webinar brought to you by Hermitage Solutions. Let me remind you that during these CyberSec Plus talks, we bring together highly qualified professionals who introduce us to the latest IT security solutions and demonstrate how it solves cybersecurity challenges. My name is Simona Bevenite, and I will be your host today as we bring Fraser Kine, system engineer at Awake, the NDR division of Arista, who will talk about how to fill the security visibility gap with network detection and response. But more about that, you will hear from Fraser. Before we start, a few reminders as always. So, of course, we are going to record a webinar. So if you have a step away for any reason, don't you worry, you will get the recording in a few days. And you also muted. So if you have any questions, just drop them into the chat and we will get to those in the end. We will have a verbal Q&A. Also, before we start, I have a small request. I would like you to answer a quick poll. So you will see it very soon on your screen. So just hit one option, and then I will give the floor to Fraser. So how important is visibility for security? Low, medium, high, please. Okay, I think majority of people answered. Just a few more seconds and then we'll bring Fraser in. Okay, thanks. Fraser, floor is yours.
Thank you, Simona. Good afternoon, everyone. And unsurprisingly, the results were that 75% of you thought that visibility is highly important for security. Some of you put 6%, 6% of you said low. I wonder how many of you will feel the same way after this presentation. My hope is that during this session, we can talk about the importance of visibility and what wraps around that. Because one of the key concepts around security is it's very difficult to secure what you can't see. And with the changing nature of modern networks, this is becoming a problem. So today, let's go through the agenda. I'm going to speak for about 45 minutes and then we're going to hand over for some Q&A. So as Simona said, if you have questions, please raise them and we'll try and answer them later on. If we can't answer them today or they have a more detailed response, then we can arrange a follow-up with you independently. So today I'm going to be talking about, first of all, the three why questions I always want to ask, which is why should you do something different? Why should you do it now? And why should you do it with Awake? So we're going to be tackling those things first of all. I'm then going to talk about what makes Awake unique. Why is Awake through Arista's approach different to the rest of the market? Then I'm going to show you an Awake demonstration. We're not going to get into too much technical depth today, but I need to show you the technology so you can really see how it works, because in many ways the technology demonstrates much more easily than it explains verbally. Then I'll talk about the Awake security services that wrap around the technology that enable you to deliver a meaningful solution to your business, your operation. And then we'll finish off with some customer use cases about Awake in action and the value that organizations have seen before we get to a Q&A. So let's begin with the three why questions. Why do something different? Why now? And why should you do it with Awake? Well, at Awake, we use the term the new network. And when we say the new network, what we're really defining is how networks have changed over years. Now, Awake and Arista believe that the network has the ground source of truth. It's just been really difficult to get that information out. And with modern networks, we've seen changes in the way that we operate. The idea of the core and perimeter has probably changed years ago. The idea that we can close our networks down, they're completely open. Wi-Fi changed that forever. But now we're also extending into shadow IT and Internet of Things. So many more devices on the network than there used to be, people enabling themselves. We've had working from home for a long time, but of course with the COVID pandemic, an increasing reliance for a business to be able to operate with people working from home. But we also have contractors coming in. We might even be operating a bring your own device or similar program on the network. You may have operational technology, not just IT, but OT as well, and how those systems interrelate with each other. And you may also, of course, be looking at cloud and software as a service as you start to expand your boundaries. All of these intercommunications are extremely powerful. They've probably given you speed, they've given you agility, and they've certainly given you rapid scale. But unfortunately, security's been left behind, and visibility about what's actually happening on this new network is a problem. So why do we need to do something about this now? Why is it compelling? Well, there are lots of reasons why we have problems with this new network. I'll just talk about a few of them here. I'm sure you have your own examples. What Awake finds when we've been working with our customers for a little while is very often over half of the devices that we see on corporate networks are what would classically be regarded as unmanaged devices. Now, of course, that percentage can vary depending on the vertical, the size of the business, and so on. But if there's lots of devices on the network which are unmanaged, how can you provide a good security situation if you don't have visibility of what's on the network? These unmanaged devices represent an attack surface for you. And it's very difficult to be able to control security if you don't have that level of visibility about what's actually out there on your networks. A second common thing that we see in terms of trends is that over half of the significant breaches that we observe actually don't involve anything which would be classically regarded as malware. Now, of course, we are seeing in the press more and more use of things like ransomware, and these attacks will continue. And you have to also figure that for every ransomware attack which tells you it's there, how many attacks are going unnoticed? Because if the ransomware can get in and it waves at you and start asking you for money, what else is happening on your networks that isn't doing that is actually looking to exfiltrate data in other ways? But what we're increasingly seeing is that it isn't just about malware. It isn't just about something you can identify as a clearly identifiable malware incident. A lot of the time it involves malintent. So this could be things like living off the land binaries, using technology like PowerShell, SSH, tools that would be used by a legitimate administrator, but misusing those for malicious activity. It could be things like credential theft, where people are accidentally tricked by phishing or otherwise to give away their credentials and have them reused. It could also be someone as an insider doing something that they shouldn't be doing, either on purpose or by accident. So we need to look beyond just malware to malicious intent. And that's a lot more complicated because it means you need to filter a lot of information to work out what's valuable, what's useful, what's legitimate, and what isn't. And there's a lot of noise to filter through. Also, another major trend we see is towards encryption. Gartner estimate that over 70% of network traffic today is encrypted. It could be even higher, and it's certainly growing. And if your traffic is encrypted, you must make sure that you still have visibility. It is not good enough from a security perspective to surrender and just say, the data is encrypted, we can't see it, nor is it possible to decrypt everything. It's too expensive, it's too complicated, it's too time-consuming, and often you can't decrypt things anyway because they're encrypted for legitimate reasons around policy and privacy. If we don't do something about these problems, we are just going to continually see security operations costing more and more money. We're going to see higher attacker dwell time, and the longer the attacker is on your network, the worse damage they can do. And there is a massive risk of missed attacks because we just don't have visibility to them. So, how do the industry suggest we solve this? If you look at people like Gartner, they talk about the SOC visibility triad. And in the triad, I identify endpoint detection and response, SIM UEBA, and then network detection and response as the triad or triumvirate of different solutions you need to provide the visibility that you need in the environment. So you probably have or are looking at endpoint detection and response for your managed assets. So where you can run agents on devices, you should do so, and you can manage those and look after their running processes and what's happening with them, keep them up to date and look out for issues. You may already be running a SIM or UBA tool that's going to receive logs from your other security systems and give you this single pane of glass for visibility. But the problem is, what about everything else? What about all the things that cannot run an agent, or all the things that cannot, will not, or do not want to communicate with your SIM? What do you do about all the other stuff? Well, that's where network detection and response comes in. It gives you that comprehensive visibility to the network communications at the ground truth level on the network, and then integrates with your other security tools to give you this 360-degree view. So why Awake? If we know we need to do something, why should we be doing it with Awake? There's lots of choices out there. Well, Awake really is a combination of both technology and people. And now, as part of Arista, we just have the scale and the scope to be able to deliver really meaningful solutions to you. And as you can imagine, over time, we'll continue to integrate our technologies into the Arista platform. Awake has over 400 person years of security experience, 200 person years of incident response experience, responding to some of the world's most consequential breaches, including at Saudi Aramco, Sony, the Bank of Bangladesh, and many others. We have over 100 patents across security, data science, and network processing. And Awake really brought together an experienced team to build a purpose-built platform for security, by security practitioners, for security practitioners. And we've coupled that with deep threat research, and the proof is in the results that we get. So this isn't just about technology, it's about the people and how the people can overlay. And Arista and Awake believe that technology is only a piece of the puzzle. You have to have the people as well to wrap around that to help you with the processes to be able to manage security properly. So what makes Awake unique? How do we approach what we do? Now, this isn't really a technical seminar today. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the Awake platform, describe what it does, and then we're going to talk about the benefits that it brings. And then I'll show you those benefits in an interactive demonstration so you can see how this actually feels to use the system. At a high level, the Awake platform is an architecture that combines packet capture and analysis with a combination of machine learning, data science, and expert human system support. How it actually works is we start with the things called Awake sensors. These Awake sensors are physical or virtual appliances that are deployed at key strategic choke points, if you like, of your network, and are fed by a mirror of the traffic from the things that you want to monitor. So these virtual or physical sensors placed strategically on your network passively record and pass full packet captured data. And this could be from a span port on your network, a tap, or it could be through a packet broker. It could be using advanced Arista technology like the DANS monitoring fabric. Either way, we are passively getting a mirror of the network traffic on these sensors. When we receive this mirror of the traffic that you want to monitor on the sensor, we actually passively record and pass the full packet capture data. So one of the unique things about Awake is we actually store PCAPs of the network traffic. And these PCAPs you can go back to and pick up and use. Depending on the available storage, on how the system is connected, those PCAPs can be available for a short period of time or a long period, depending on your storage retention needs. But it means you can actually go back and get the network traffic. And this is really useful if in the instance that you had an incident and you maybe wanted to press charges, these things are forensically intact. You can actually get the information from the PCAPs themselves. But once we have this information on the sensors from these PCAPs, we actually pass them, and we do deep protocol analysis across layers 2 to 7 of the network stack, and we extract from the network data you send us hundreds of security relevant signals, information that we can pull out from deep protocol analysis to understand and summarize what's happening actually on the network. We then pass this summary information to an appliance called the Awake Nucleus, and this is the brain. And at this point, we can ask the network all sorts of questions to understand what's happening. Now, one of the other benefits about Awake is that all of this can take place in your infrastructure. It's privacy aware. So there is no need to send your network data to some external cloud system to be monitored. And of course, that's very important for people in terms of compliance and control of and visibility of your data. All of this can happen in-house and can be processed in-house. So what happens when the data arrives at the nucleus? We ask it questions. And from this, we can extract the information we need to deliver visibility and context to help you understand your network and what is actually going on from a ground truth perspective. There are three main things this enables us to do, which I'll talk about briefly now, and then I'll show you through a demonstration in the actual platform. The first thing we're going to do when we extract all this information and analyze it is we're going to improve your situational awareness. We're going to give you much better visibility of what is actually running on your network. We call this technology Entity IQ, And what it does is it discovers, profiles, and tracks the devices, the users, and applications on your network and logically links them together. So the first thing we're going to do is to help you to identify the types of devices that are currently in use on the network and how they potentially relate to each other and can be grouped together. And from this, we build something called the Security Knowledge Graph. And this is an understanding of your network as shown by the underlying real data, so that we understand what devices are doing on your network, how they relate to each other. And this is constantly morphing and constantly changing as your network constantly morphs and changes. So we're going to disambiguate what's actually happening on your network and show you how it's operating. Once we know what's on the network, the next thing we're going to do is to enable you to hunt across it. So threat hunting gives you that capability to ask the network questions and to find the answers for what's actually happening in the environment. And Awake has a unique approach to doing this with a technology we call AML, the adversarial modeling language. And you can think of this in a number of different ways. It's like a vocabulary that enables you to ask your network questions. It enables you to search your network for the information that you think is important. You can also think of AML a bit like Lego, in the way that Lego enables you to build anything you need. Well, with AML, we can build searches for anything we want to find, and we build our own searches from this, and you can just sit back and relax and let Awake automatically build the searches, or you can actually build your own. So the platform is completely transparent and extensible. And then the third major benefit is how can we make security more autonomous? We have a people problem in the industry. There are simply not enough people to do the work that is necessary. So we want to help you at Awake Arista by providing automation tools within the platform that can simplify and automate much of the work. The investigative process for an analyst is manual, it's repetitive, and it's error prone. And much of that work is gathered by trying to get all the information that is available on the network and trying to pull it all together. So Awake attempts to do as much as possible of that for you on your behalf and makes you or your analyst teams much more efficient in the way that they react to security. So those are the concepts. Let's have a look at them in action. So I'm just going to switch over into the brain, the dashboard, which is running on the nucleus. This is our web-based interface. So you can see I've just logged into the interface here and I'm being shown the platform dashboard. Platform dashboard is where I go for my summary information, and the dashboard is completely configurable. So once I'm used to using the platform, I can create a visualization to show me the information that I am interested in a time frame that I'm interested in viewing it. But out of the box, we have two default dashboards. The system dashboard tells me what's happening in my environment, and the risk dashboard tells me what should I be concerned about, what should I investigate first. So let's start with the system dashboard. Let's talk first of all about situational awareness. What's actually happening on the network? Through Awake's Entity IQ technology, we uniquely have a means with just network traffic and no need to install any agents to actually look at what's happening on your network and turn that information into meaningful context that you can use. So if we look on the top right here, we can see an all devices visualization. If I expand that, you can see that we are automatically identifying the different types of devices that are running on this network. Now, this is just a very simple demonstration environment, but you can see we're picking out 11 Linux devices, we have 8 Windows devices, we have different types, specific types of iPhone and so on. In our customer environments, we have identified Tesla cars connected to the guest Wi-Fi. We've identified Peloton exercise bicycles that people have plugged in their offices so they can exercise while they're in the office. We've seen Amazon Alexas appear on the network. And the great thing about Awake is that we actually tell people what these things are. We identify them as entities, as devices. Because often what happens is you just see information in the form of IP addresses, network sessions, and protocols. Those things are important, but they lack context. Anyone using a DHCP address knows that the address could change at any time and be used by different devices, but Awake can actually use artificial intelligence and machine learning to automatically correlate, profile, and track these entities and also understand their behaviors, their interrelationships, and enable you to follow them around as they move around. So if, for example, I want to know about the Windows devices on my network, I can click into the platform and we will jump from the dashboard into a workbench which shows me these particular types of devices on my network. And if we click into one of these devices, we can show the device profile. So Awake will automatically, just from network traffic, pull out and understand the information needed to be able to nominate this as a particular device on your network. So these things called fingerprints are just characteristic ways in which this device talks on the network, and we can relate that to a particular device. So this is a bit like human beings. When we meet each other, we subconsciously notice the color of our hair, whether we wear glasses, if we're male or female, our accent, where we come from. All these different other pieces of information are automatically being processed by humans all the time. And that means if we meet someone once, if we see them 6 months later, we're likely to recognize them. Awake does the same thing on the network. We understand the communications and break them down and say, we think this is this device. This is the name of the device, and this is the main user of the device. And we can identify from network traffic the operating system that's being used, when the device was first and last seen on the network. We can see all the different IP addresses it's been using, because a device may change its IP address all the time. So the most important thing is it's this device. The IP address, it's ephemeral, changes anytime. We can see the different users that have logged into this device over the network. But we think the main user of the device is A. Oakley because they've logged in more than anyone else. We can see the applications that are being used on the device. And we can identify similar devices on the network. So other devices on the network, which are definitely different devices, they're different entities, but they share similar behavioral patterns. So as we start to watch this over time, whenever something interesting happens on the network, we get to compare it to the behavior of this device and the behavior of this device's peer group to see if it's relevant and interesting, or if it's something that's common in the environment and probably doesn't need investigation. We can also optionally integrate with an EDR tool. So if you're running an EDR tool on your platform, we can integrate the two together. And it gives us this really nice understanding of what's actually happening on the network at any particular time. So now we've got better situational awareness. We actually know what devices are on the network. The next question is, what are they doing? So within Awake, we have the ability to search across this information and tell you about risks and interesting behavior. And we do all of this through our adversarial modeling language. So this modeling language, as I said earlier, is like a vocabulary to ask questions. So we build our own detections from this language. We have things called adversarial models, which are pre-built, created and curated detections from Awake that we are constantly updating within the platform. And we will automatically search the environment to see if any of these models have been hit. And these models are all aligned with the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So you can see things like command and control behaviors. You can see things like exfiltration, compliance, discovery, all aligned with things that you recognize could be risks to the business. But the really great thing about Awake is that these detections are actually described by us as well, and we show you what's actually happening behind them because they're all built from this language. So if I go back into the platform dashboard, not only will we identify when any particular device has fired against one of these detection models, we'll actually also show you how that model works. So when we see something interesting, we'll say, this probably warrants some investigation. And we'll tell you what we've found. We'll tell you why we think it's important and what you should do next. But uniquely, we will also tell you this is how we found it. And this is different and unique in the industry. A lot of security tools will tell you they found something, but they won't say how they've actually found it. But with Awake, we actually describe the language ourselves. So this is our adversarial modeling language that we used to do this detection. So it's transparent, you can check and verify it. And it's also extensible, because if you have the time and the skills, you can look at how the model works and say, it's not quite right for us. We want to purpose build this for our own environment. We want to tweak the detection to make sure it is perfect for what we're looking for. so we can do all of this for you as well. So when you actually investigate something that's happening on the network, you know how it was found, and you can verify it before you investigate it. And then when we actually give you the results, because we have layers 2 through 7, the amount of detail that we can provide about the communication is very, very granular. So you can see all the details of the information that you need to find from layers 2 to 7. And all of this is retained in the long term. By default for 90 days, we can even extend it up to 180 days, so half a year's worth of the ability to look back on the network for any of this data. So we can use the detections that are built into the platform to find interesting things, but we can also search for data ourselves. So, for example, what we can do is I can say to the system, I would like to find all of the network communications on the network in the last week. And the system will summarize to me, here are all the devices I've seen on the network, just 86 of them in this test network for the last week, all of the domains that these devices have been visiting, and all of the activities that they've been doing on the network. And the activities show us really granular information about these communications and all the context we could need. So if, for example, I want to search for something that's happening to Windows devices, I want to find out what my Windows devices have been doing in the last week, I can simply click into the system. And like buying shoes online or a book from Amazon, I can simply break down the traffic information and faceted search for what I need. So the system will break down all of the traffic in the last week into the activities they've been doing, the domains that they've been visiting, and the devices themselves. So I can look at the data in the last week and say, show me all the operating systems awake on the network in the last week. Okay, maybe I just want to look at the Windows ones. So now I've gone from 86 devices on the network to just 9. Oh, it looks like there's a couple here that might be servers. I don't want servers. I only want Windows 10. So I can just say, just show me the Windows 10 devices. Okay, I've only got 7 Windows 10 devices. Show me the domains that they've been visiting in the last week. 150 domains. Too many to investigate. Let's summarize them. Awake, break down the domains and show me how the domains operate. Show me the categories of these domains. Maybe I want to see which ones of my Windows 10 devices are using social networks, maybe streaming media sites or online personal storage sites. And so just by pointing and clicking in the platform, we are automatically using our adversarial modeling language to find the information that you're looking for. So you can flexibly search for just about anything you need. And now in the last week, I have, just 4 devices going to just 9 domains. Let's see what they're actually up to. This is potentially interesting. One of my devices with this name and using this IP address has been to Dropbox. Actually, this is interesting. This device used an old version of TLS. I'm not very happy with people doing that. So why don't I search for all the times that these devices have been using an old version of TLS for communication? And now I have just the information I need with granular visibility about the application, how the communications work. And I've now built a sophisticated detection on my network in 2 minutes. I can run this whenever I like, and I can save this to reuse again because it's all just built from that Lego brick language. So we know what's on the network. We know what it's doing. How can we be more autonomous about the way we work? We're all busy people. How much automation can happen on my behalf? Because I'm too busy to do all of the investigation work. And I also recognize that maybe sometimes I make mistakes. So Awake has a piece of technology which we generically call Ava. And Ava is the Awake virtual assistant. And what Ava is very good at is she will go and collect information for you and link it together. Ava will join the dots. And Ava is ever present within the Awake platform, including within the platform itself performing functionality, but also referring to the Awake cloud. So she can ask about things like domains and IP addresses and do open source intelligence research on your behalf. So let's show you an example of how Ava works, and we'll do it through something called a situation. A situation is a documentation tool that when you find the information that is interesting, You want to start organizing it and maybe doing some work and investigating it further and pulling together different resources of information. Where do you collate all this information to when you find it? How do you organize your thoughts? How do you create a graphical storyboard of how this works? Well, that's what situations do. Situations give you this graphical display that enables you to see and understand the attack from beginning to end. So you can see from a storyboard perspective everything that was happening and how these things work together. And Awake can build these automatically for you. So as an example, you come into the office on one day and you see the high priority devices that we've identified to you. You can click on them and say, I'm going to investigate these 4 devices today. Let's start with this one. So we have a particular device called Win81, and we can see when it was first and last on the network, and we can see all the different events of what it's been doing and how it's been working. We can then scroll through this to say, well, what threats are you telling us about Awake? Some of these are high-risk domains that the device has been accessing. But as we scroll through, we're going to find a particular adversarial model, which is one of the automatic things that Awake has found on your system. And when we find this, we can say, Awake says that there's some possible command and control activity from this device. So we can see the traffic, as we showed before, the details and granular view of what's happening. And then we can say, okay, this does look interesting. I need to do some further research. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a situation, create a documentation. And this situation is going to be called possible command and control. We'll save this. And then the system will say, what actual traffic are you sending to me? What is this traffic doing? Well, we think it might be command and control traffic. So now we've created this situation. What we can do in the Awake platform is we can let the system start investigating this for us. So we've created this situation. And in here I can say, possible C2 to investigate. Let's see what Ava thinks first. So before I start investigating as a human, I can ask the platform to take a look for me. So as I'm talking, the situation says refresh. When I click refresh, we can see that by just adding this traffic sample, the Awake system is automatically starting to build this graphical attack map for me, which shows me the devices and the locations that they're going to. What will then happen is the system will continue to automate and join the dots together for me. So the Ava system is now starting to do research on my behalf. She's saying, what other devices are involved? What do the IP addresses look like? What do the domains look like? What does the public cloud think of these particular domains? Is there any other evidence of other things going on these devices? She's effectively doing a lot of the triage work that an analyst would be doing. And while I've been talking, I can just click refresh the situation, and you can see that now she's putting the work in for me to look at the different reputations and IP address information, and she's found that this could be a dodgy domain. So I added one piece of information, and the system is doing a load of research for me, and I can just sit and allow the system to carry on working, and it will create a full audit log of what it's doing. And I, as an analyst, can just sit back and say, this research work is going on my behalf. And then as a human, I can step back in at any time to say, what do I need to investigate further myself? And that will just continue to run. And as you can see now, the system has actually identified, well, you started by giving me one domain. I've actually found 16 others that device was also going to around the similar time. And she will go ahead and research these ones as well to find out if there's any correlation. So we know what's on the network, we know what it's doing, and we can automate the work as much as possible of research. So another reason why Awake isn't just the technology, it's the human expertise as well. We know that this is a people problem and that you guys or your staff may be overloaded. it's very difficult to hire and retain the kind of skills in the marketplace you need to do a good job of security. So the platform can be consumed just as a platform and integrated with your existing tools, and your people can be trained to use it. But if also you want it, there are human beings available from Awake as well. Experienced threat hunters, experienced incident research people who can help you to integrate the technology. And this can be consumed in a number of different ways depending on what your requirements are. So we can massively reduce the work effort needed to manage your security. We can implement world-class customized playbooks. These people understand security at a world-class level and can bring that to bear in your environments and integrate with your existing teams. And we can communicate all of this in a seamless fashion to make sure it's not just a product that you're consuming, it's actually a meaningful service. And some examples of this is shown on the screen here. The idea really behind the Awake services is to get decisive answers to the questions, are we breached? And what can be done to help prevent a future breach? So there are proactive assessments that you can undertake should you want to. So one of these is an attack surface assessment. And this is an approach to identifying ongoing or past attacker activity in your environment. It also looks at your organization from an adversarial point of view, using open source intelligence to identify potential points of attack. And it identifies any weaknesses in the planning, response, and remediation of adversarial attacks. On the other end, we have a digital forensic and IR response service. So if in the unfortunate situation that you believe you have already been attacked, we can help you to help clean up the mess. And in the middle, we have a full managed network detection and response. So if you like the idea of NDR, but don't have the time or the manpower or the skills to manage it, we can do it all for you. All of these are entirely optional, but these services are really about getting in front of the problem before it happens wherever possible. So let's look at some use cases of Awake in action. How have other people used the technology? Well, one specific example is a malicious insider who was hacking the VoIP phone system. This was a consumer finance organization who ran an evaluation of Awake and found during the evaluation that there was a very interesting use case in their environment. What actually was happening in their environment, they determined, was Awake identified a specific device on the network that was being used to record audio. And this was an IP phone. It was a Polycom spider phone, conference call phone. And it was outside the CEO and CFO's office on the executive floor. And what was actually happening was a contractor on the system was using this IP phone to record private meetings, to get information about mergers and acquisitions, and was recording that information and was uploading it online and then downloading it later on his personal device, and was using that information for insider trading reasons. Now, this is something that had been happening in the customer environment for some time, but their existing network tools ignored it because it seemed like normal behavior because it had been happening for some time. But when Awake came into the environment, we compared the behavior of an individual device to other similar devices and said, why is one Polycom device communicating in a strange way that is different to all the others? And all of this communication was encrypted. We didn't have to decrypt anything. We just said, this behavior is weird. Contextually, it doesn't fit. We alerted people to it and provided all the information they needed to identify the cluster of VoIP phones, looked at the outlying device, and enabled them to find the information that was necessary. The next example is a targeted attack around hacking the hybrid cloud. The problem with this situation is that it shows how the security problem and the new network is multidimensional. It spans multiple parts of the new network. It avoids malware, and it's hard to detect with just simple pattern matching technologies. In this particular instance, which was a financial services organization, there was an AWS administrator who had their credentials stolen. And once they were stolen, it enabled access to AWS from anywhere, of course, and those were used against the organization's cloud infrastructure. And this again had been missed by other tools. Where Awake spotted this was because we can correlate and provide context. We were able to detect a malicious Chrome extension being used on a browser on one of the devices, and that had been stealing information, including the logon data. And the final example is a state-sponsored espionage case. And this was a case of hacking the supply chain. It was an oil and gas industry. And what actually happened in this case was the supply chain was compromised and used as a gateway. What was actually going on, we found out, was that a contractor was coming in late on a Friday and plugged in a compromised laptop. The attackers then moved laterally to the critical infrastructure. So no traditional malware was used in the compromise. Most of it was fileless-based malware. And it brings back the simple concept that people are the perimeter. And with a flexible working world, which we inevitably have, we're going to see more of these sorts of problems. So before we get into the Q&A, I want to say, first of all, thank you for your time. I hope you found that information interesting. And I think, Simona, before we, I'm just going to quickly summarize, and then we're going to have another quick poll. But I just wanted to summarize to say that at Awake and Arista, we believe that the network is the source of truth. It's just that we've never really had a platform to be able to get that information out. The Awake Network Detection and Response platform gives you the ability to ask the network questions and to flexibly search your network for what is actually going on, and gives you a way to understand and have visibility of what's actually happening on the network and all of the context to then be able to take that information, understand it, and to make smart business decisions around security. So before we go to the Q&A, Simona, I think you had another poll that you wanted to run?
Yes, Fraser. So yeah, poll is coming. Here you go. So after this poll, we will move to Q&A. I see we have got 2 questions already, and we have plenty of time. Okay, it's almost done, like a few more seconds.
So Simona, I can see the questions on the chat. Tell me when you're ready and I can start answering those.
I'm closing the poll. I think majority of people answered, so thank you. And so the first question is, does Awake extract information from encrypted traffic?
Yeah, so encrypted traffic analysis is one of the technologies that Awake uses in our platform. And I'm going to say our unique approach. I won't say it's unique, but our unusual approach to this is Awake enables you to have visibility of traffic without decrypting it. We believe that traffic is encrypted for a reason. So if you want to send us decrypted traffic, great. But if you send us encrypted traffic, that's no problem as well. Now, this is quite a long conversation, technical conversation, but at a high level, the reason why Awake is able to deliver this is we have several techniques for being able to analyze traffic, even though it's encrypted. So that includes some data science techniques like neural networks and decision trees that enables us, even though the traffic is encrypted, to tell the difference between an interactive shell, a web browsing session, file transfers, videos, and so on without decrypting. Also, the way that Awake approaches this is because we look at the full story, we're interested in the context of the communications that happen around encrypted traffic. So we're not just looking at the piece of the information, we're saying what happened before, what happened afterwards. The other thing we can do is the metadata and header information about traffic very often is not encrypted, even in this highly encrypted world. So we don't actually need to see the encrypted payload. We can just see from the nature of the communications what's actually going on. And then finally, we can use long-term entity tracking of the device. So if we understand that this is a particular device and we follow that device as it moves around the network, we can understand its patterns of behavior and we can recognize, even if the traffic is encrypted, that it's doing something it wouldn't normally do. As you can probably tell, Arturas, that's quite a long answer to that question. We can discuss that on another call if you want to, but I'm going to have to stop there just in the interest of time.
Thank you, Fraser. Very comprehensive. So next question is about, is it virtual machine or appliance device?
The sensors that record the information or receive the mirrored traffic from the network can either be physical or virtual appliances, Jeb. So you can decide on what is the right form factor for you. The nucleus, the analytics brain, is currently just a physical device. So there's a mix of physical or virtual sensors, and the nucleus, the brain analytics, is a physical device.
Okay, thank you. One more, what are the benefits of integrated an EDR to Awake?
Well, the way that we see this is that going back to the idea of the SOC triad was that we have like a triangle, if you like, with a stool with 3 legs. One of those legs is EDR, one of them is SIM, and one of them is NDR. So EDR is extremely important, and of course it gives you that control of the assets. So the benefits of integrating them together is the EDR tool will be able to have very granular control and functionality of the endpoint, and then the NDR can provide all of the context around the network. So I'll give you a specific example. If you integrate the two together, what Awake can tell you is how many. You can say, I thought we had 500 Windows devices on the network and they should all be running our NDR tool. We can say to you, well, you thought you had 500 devices. We've actually found 550 devices. And of those 550, only 480 are actually running your EDR tool. So integrating them together, we can show you where you've deployed your EDR and show you gaps. The other thing we can then do is we can use the EDR tool. So if we find a threat on one of your appliances, we can then use the EDR tool integration within Awake. You can click a single button and you can tell your EDR tool to take that device off the network. So it's the idea of the tools working together like a jigsaw to provide the whole picture.
Okay, great. And other question is kind of commercial more, but what about MSPs? Is Awake available for MSPs?
Yes, it is potentially available for MSPs, and we obviously recognise that's a big part of the market. All I would suggest you do is contact Hermitage for that, and we can, through Simona or your regular Hermitage contacts, and we can have a more detailed conversation about that topic.
Sure, thanks. One more, actually, we got a lot of questions in the chat, so we have still 10 minutes. And what is the difference between Arista Awake and network access control solutions?
Well, the idea behind Arista Awake is it's designed as a network detection and response. So it's designed to tell you information about what's actually happening on the network and provide that visibility and context and give you the decision points around the network to then do a follow-up action. Where network access control solutions then kick in and can be potentially integrated with is that they can then apply the restrictions that you need. So they're kind of like hand in glove. They work together. They're brother, sister, they're partners. So Awake would tell you you have a problem. Then you can take that information and say, I have a problem on this device. I can use the NAC technology to control that device should be taken off the network, should be quarantined or whatever else. So they're complementary technologies, broadly speaking, that just solve slightly different problems.
Okay, thank you. And one more, is there any integration possibility with other security solutions, for example, AV, FW, and etc.?
Absolutely, yes. Awake through Arista provides part of the solution, going back to the jigsaw analogy. So we will tell you that there's something interesting happening on your network, and then we have open integrations with other people. Some of those integrations are already pre-built, but other ones we have a full set of APIs that we can integrate. So some specific examples, you can integrate with a SIM tool. So for example, you could send information out to Splunk or a similar tool. We can integrate with SOAR tools, so or orchestration tools, so we can do that to Phantom or Demisto, potentially others. In terms of firewalls, we can integrate with Palo Alto and others. So we could, for example, alert you that a particular thing is happening on the network, and we can then send a message out to the Palo Alto firewalls to say, block these specific ports or IPs and so on. So yes, the answer is integrations are key to what we do. We have many built in, and we work with our customers to build others that they need.
Wonderful. And is any of the data sent to the cloud?
One of the great things about Awake, the Arista solution, is that it is privacy aware. So the only data that we send to the cloud is information which is nothing to do with the actual network traffic and is non-attributable. It's not the network traffic itself. So the only thing we send to the cloud is information that could be useful, for example, for open source intelligence, and none of it is attributable. So for example, we're not going to send any data to do analysis. None of your actual network traffic goes out. But if you're browsing to a domain, one of the things we may do is say, you've been to xyz.com. And one of the things we'll do is we'll just ask our Awake Cloud, what do you know about xyz.com? What do you know about this external IP address? So none of that is attributable. It's just the same kind of information that you as an analyst would go and Google for if you were investigating it. And that's one of, again, the unique advantages of Awake. We don't have to send your network data to the cloud to do analytics. All of the analytics happens in-house.
Wonderful. And one more question. How long does the Awake platform need to learn our network before it starts providing useful information? Does it need to learn periodically?
Yeah, this is a good question, something that I didn't talk about earlier on. But the idea behind a lot of NDR tools is they do something called, I think, let's see if I can still draw on the screen. They do something called baselining. No, sorry. Here we go. they baseline the network. And the idea of a baseline is that the system will learn the network, and it will say, okay, on day 1, I'm going to learn your network. And then maybe on day 21, after about 3 weeks, I understand how your network works. And then from that point on, it will tell you, is anything different? Awake doesn't believe in this model. So the answer to the question is, Awake doesn't have this same sort of learning patterns. We can typically provide value extremely quickly, usually within hours of putting the appliance in. And the reason we don't do this temporal baselining is the problem is sometimes, or very often, you can accidentally bring bad behavior into the baseline. And this is what had happened in the example I gave of the Polycom phones a few minutes ago. This had been happening for some time on the network, and all the other tools baselined it as normal behavior because it was already happening. The other problem that we have is just because something is an anomaly, does it mean it's interesting? Maybe not. Networks change all the time. Not all bad things are anomalies. Not all anomalies are bad things. They're all contextual. So that's a long-winded answer to the question to say, no, we don't need to do that. We build the security knowledge graph. We start building it straight away as if you like a database of what's happening on the network and everything else that's going on. Database is an oversimplification, it's a knowledge graph. But effectively, we have a rolling understanding of your network. So no, there is no long learning period and no need to relearn. The system is constantly learning, constantly being updated because your network is constantly changing and it's constantly being updated.
Okay, great. And the last one. So how is Awake planning to integrate with the wider Arista portfolio, for example, campus products?
Yeah, so as you can imagine, we want to integrate further and further with Arista. We were only acquired in October of last year, and we were already starting to do this sort of work. So today, the Awake sensors that go to the Awake nucleus, they receive information from the network from various different sources. So these could be getting, for example, Arista switches, could be sending a span to these devices. But over time, we want to integrate, and the most integration we've done so far, or the earliest integration, is with the Arista platform through the DANS monitoring fabric. So if you are using or interested in the DANS monitoring fabric to give you that overlay network, you can use the DANS monitoring fabric as the means of getting the data into the sensors. And this can give you massive efficiencies on the numbers of sensors that you need and the data that you send to it. The other great advantage of this is it gives you massive packet storage. So it means you can go back and retrieve PCAPs. We store the metadata for up to 180 days, 90 is standard. But if you want the PCAPs for longer, you can use DMF. So the first point of integration with the wider Arista platform and to scale out the infrastructure will be with the DMS, the DANS monitoring fabric, and we can optimize full packet forensics through integration with the DMF recorder node. And that is actually expected in the middle of this year. So we're well on the way to that. Over time, you can expect then further integrations into the Arista platform, but DMF is the first place we're going to do it.
And actually, Fraser, while we were speaking, we got one more question. So can Awake work in Cisco network?
Yes, it can. And I'm actually glad, Gatis, you asked this question, because although we want to integrate into Arista and we'll make sure that the integrations work really seamlessly, we recognize that there are lots of different technologies out there, and Awake and Arista, I think, are very open in our approach to doing this. So absolutely, it can work in a Cisco network. As long as you can get the information to an Awake sensor, it can come from anything. It can come from a packet broker, it can come from a tap, it can come from a span from a Cisco switch. It's no problem at all. We will make it work better and better with Arista over time to make sure the technologies work seamlessly together and add extra value. But if you're not using Arista switching technology or any other technologies, you can absolutely still use Awake.
Okay, it was the last question, Fraser.
Okay.
But we still have actually a few minutes. So, well, thank you very much, Fraser. A lot of valuable content for me and for everybody, I think. And thank everybody for joining us today. If you have any questions after the session, feel free to reach out to us. Our email address is info@hermitage.lt. And I hope to see you all in our upcoming webinar, which is actually about NAC. So it's quite, similar, or let's say it's quite useful after this session to listen more about NAC solution in June. So with this note, I would like to end our webinar today. And Fraser, thank you again for the presentation. So have a nice day and hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Simona. Thank you, everyone, for your time. Bye-bye.